You bring up such a good point, like not relying on an external substance to make you happy, instead relying on yourself. There's infinite freedom in that, and there's infinite power in that, and you're going to be better and stronger for it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Willpower Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that I have a super special guest. I just met her, but I'm excited to learn more about her. Her name is Megan, and I think I am finally pronouncing that correctly. Am I right, Megan?
You got it. First try. Good job.
First try. Beautiful. So Megan has come to find me, and I found her through mutual friends. But when she shared her story to me, I was super inspired from being a mother, from being an ultra runner, or to practicing medicine. The list goes on and on. So I was just really excited to have this open, honest conversation with you. So hi, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's so nice to meet you in person. I've been following you for a little while, so you're doing amazing things.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say that. Thank you. So, Megan, can you give our audience just a little brief background on who you are and what you're all about and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a mom of 3 kids. I am a family nurse practitioner, have my own practice here in Georgia. I do a lot of mental health. I'm not a mental health provider, but I have a deep passion for helping patients with those issues. I am almost 6 years in recovery from alcohol, which is awesome.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. In the medical world, anything over 5 years is what we call clinical long-term sobriety. And I'm just so happy to be here. It's a completely different life. And yeah, I'm a big runner. I've been running competitively since I was 3 years old. I've done lots of fun things in running, was a collegiate runner. I was a good runner. I've been a bad runner. I'm just tapping back into it. I just turned 40 this year. And so that's an interesting age to turn. I'm in act 2 of my life for sure. But yeah.
Well, I'm in act 2. Yeah, I'm almost going to turn 30. Well, let's see, 38, 30. Yeah, so I have 2 more years. But yeah, I'm in act 2 for sure. Well, the way I look at it, though, when I woke up from the transplant and I said, I'm going to be a different person. So I'm actually in act 1, I feel like, of my real life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That makes any sense?
No, it does. It makes total sense. I think that's amazing. And that was what, April of 2023? Or?
That was April of 2023.
Okay, wow.
So May 2nd was the day of the transplant itself. And then April was when I was slowly dying. I had 2 weeks left of life. And then the very beginning of May is when I got transplanted. So pretty crazy.
That's just an amazing story.
Second go at life. So what do you do when you get a second go at life? You start a podcast.
Absolutely.
You tell the world about how how extremely overrated alcohol is.
Well,
and,
I think
and how it can kill you.
I think it definitely should fuel you with like a purpose. Like you definitely have a much bigger purpose on this earth, and that was not your time to go. And God is calling you, or your higher power is definitely calling you to other things. And I think that's really cool to be like fueled by that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for saying that. That's really cool of you. So Megan, I have a question for you. So Megan, as a healthcare provider and someone in recovery, how has your personal journey influenced your approach to treating patients with mental health challenges?
That's a really good question. Very good question. I think that I'm able to sit in the darkness with patients and then pull them to the light because I've been there. I think as a provider, you have a patient that comes in that has addiction issues. A lot of people are going to judge them or pity them. And I always avoid that. You really need to approach them with empathy. And I think as a provider, it's important to have good communication, but also listen, like really listen. And also to treat each patient differently. Like you can't treat every patient the same. Everyone is very individual in why they're there. So I think, given my history, I've learned to have a lot more compassion for people. And instead of like looking at them and being like they're bad, like actually being curious about why they're acting out in these ways and to have that empathy.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, let's get into that. So you are a very unique character in the sense that you're a nurse practitioner and you've also had substance abuse issues, mainly alcohol, correct?
Correct.
Or just alcohol?
Just alcohol.
Okay, just alcohol. So that puts you in a very unique place. And I'm sure that that's not the easiest waters to tread when it comes to practicing medicine and then also being on the other end of it in recovery. So can you compare or contrast the two and how that might be very difficult, or maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, alcohol does not discriminate. It affects every single
Mm-hmm.
person that drinks it, obviously to different levels. But, politicians, lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers, a lot of people who have high stress jobs, you'll actually see more of substance use
Mm-hmm.
or substance abuse. And then those people, though, they're so afraid to speak out about it or get help because of the shame associated with it because of their social status. So I think, years ago, someone like me, I could have never spoken out publicly about it. It would have been a career ending move for me. But now, because of people like you and other people in recovery, I've been able to have this platform and like shred that stigma. And I think that is so powerful. And I want to be a part of that movement moving forward. Like, I very much want to continue to shred the stigma surrounded with alcohol. And, I think it's important that we talk about those issues because the more you hide something, the more it grows, right? So
Mm-hmm.
being able to talk about it in a public way. So I think that kind of helps me a lot as a provider, like gone through what I've gone through, and also to be public about like the secrets and stuff that I've gone through.
Yeah. How would you say that in your professional life that you're looked at differently, or maybe that's not the right word, or you're just, I don't know. How does it feel to walk in? Is it public where you work, or is it kind of whatever?
Yeah, so I work at a privately owned like family practice. And, I
Uh-huh.
don't, wear it on my shirt that I'm in recovery. But if I have a
Right.
patient that's struggling, I definitely will open up to them about my journey and, the things that I did that helped me get sober. But did come out sober 6 months into my recovery very publicly, on all my social media. And that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And
I
I've
bet.
done some scary stuff in my life. I think, for so long, my issues were because I hid them, right? So in order for me to stay sober, I needed to be honest. I needed to be completely
Mm,
honest, not only with myself, but with everyone around me. And I also think like asking for help actually does not show weakness. It shows strength.
mm. I could not agree with you more. Especially I'm coming from like a teaching background, and you're coming from like the medical field, so it's very different, but also very similar in the sense that once we put ourselves up into the public eye and we start talking about these issues that so many people are suffering, and whether it be you're a nurse a practitioner, or someone like myself who's been teaching for 13 years, it does not discriminate, what you said earlier, and I love that, and it totally opens up the connection or the vulnerability level of the patient to the person practicing. I feel like I love that. I feel like if I had a doctor um, come into the office prior to my transplant journey, and approach it with like the compassion and just heart, I guess, with how you're expressing this, then I feel like there could have been a lot more help and growth that could have happened with me if someone like yourself was really honest about how prevalent this is as a disease in the world.
Absolutely. So I had an experience like this, what you're talking about. So I was a labor and delivery nurse, and, that was kind of the end of my drinking career. And I had gone to the doctor because I was having panic attacks and all of the symptoms of someone with alcohol use disorder. My blood pressure was high, these extreme symptoms of panic attacks, like where my hands would go numb, my throat would feel like it was closing, giving her all of the signs that I had a bad relationship with alcohol, but not coming outright and saying it. And it just went completely over her head. And that whole experience, like looking back retrospectively, it's not her fault, but I have been fueled by that to be that type of provider that looks out for those symptoms and those signs, to be able to bring up that conversation, because then you can get a patient to go from pre-contemplation to contemplation about their relationship with alcohol. And that can literally change their life.
Yeah. In your private practice, is it a federal law or just a practice by practice, state by state law that you have to be 6 months sober prior to the transplant? Do you know anything about that?
Usually, yes. And that might be more of a state to state thing. But yes, usually you have to have a pretty long-term sobriety before they're going to
Hmm.
operate on you.
Yeah, because I had that issue because I was about 4 months sober when at the hospital I was at here in where I live outside the suburbs of Boston, and yeah, they were really hard on that 6 month rule.
Mm-hmm.
But the more research I did, my wife, my family, the more I spoke about it openly with others,
Yes.
I noticed that the more hospitals I called, the more people I reached out to, the more compassion, the more empathy, the more vulnerability that I was showing from like a genuine perspective, the better the phone calls went, the better the conversations went. And then eventually I did get, led into a hospital that was gracious and open and willing to look at my case, go through like the psychological evaluations and so on and so forth. And then eventually had that life-saving liver and kidney transplant. So, but what's interesting, when I first went into, I was in such denial for my alcohol abuse that when I went in to the hospital for the first time, I was convinced it was I had IBS issues because I was going to the bathroom so frequently when I was killing myself. I basically had a MELD score of 40, which is like the highest it gets to. And I was in denial of it. And I remember it was a nurse practitioner actually who looked at me and they said to me, very honestly and candidly, if you don't cut the booze like now, you're either going to be back here really shortly or you're going to be in a grave. And I'll never forget that. So when someone with AUD comes into your office, say, and you get to meet them and talk to them, can you walk me through that process, what that looks like for you? Is it any different or is it the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like, drinking really isn't the problem. It's the ineffective solution, right? So usually you're going to have to screen the patient for other issues. So why are they drinking? It's not necessarily the alcohol, right? If it wasn't the alcohol, it'd be something else. So do they have like a co-occurring mental health disorder? Do they have some past trauma? Have they ever done therapy? Do they have certain labs that are causing them to have certain conditions? So it's kind of like a comprehensive profile. And then, first and foremost, I need to see like how much are they drinking, because certain patients I have to actually send to detox. I can't detox them myself if they're heavy drinkers. And there's a CWA score. There's a whole like profile that we do on patients. So if I can detox them myself, that would be a benzo taper. So you do like a 2-week taper of benzodiazepines, and then I'll bring them back in. If they're just kind of like binge drinking and they're not physically addicted to alcohol, then we go straight into like getting them into therapy, working on their identity and their beliefs. Because ultimately, like, you can't just use willpower to change drinking. You have to actually change your belief system about it. And you have to like deconstruct all of those beliefs that you had about alcohol. Like, it made you funny. It was a social lubricant. It made you smart. It made you pretty. You have to have it. Like, we have to really break all of that, those unique individualistic principles down with the patient. And then, the biggest thing with recovery, and this, is community. They have to get some type of accountability community.
Yeah. There were so many things that you just mentioned there that I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. So that's really cool for thinking that way. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Since COVID has happened and people really started to kind of ramp up their drinking indoors and things like that, and then they got out of control, did you see an uptick with people coming in at your office with alcohol issues?
100%. 100%. Yeah. There's definitely an increase in that. I mean, and that's part of just humanity too. We were all going through so much as a collective nation and, geographically. But I mean, I also think too, there was a lot more depression and anxiety. And those are the things that really fuel people to drink more, to numb more. So yeah, I mean, we definitely saw a lot more of those patients. It's interesting, like, what gets a person sober. And, the odds are kind of stacked against most people, unfortunately. And for someone like me, who's like a Pollyanna and believes that I can change everyone, sometimes it's, I've had to learn as a provider, that I can't save everyone. I can have a savior complex sometimes, but I will do my very best. But it's interesting. I had one patient, and I won't give out any information, obviously, because of HIPAA, but I tried a lot of different things to get him sober, and I hadn't seen him in a while. I tried all of my tricks in the book and getting him into all these programs. And it had been a year since I seen him. He came back in and he looked amazing. His eyes were clear. He was so excited to see me. He had been sober for a long time, I think like 9 months. And I was like, what was it? Like, what actually clicked for you? Because I want to learn. And he said, you know what? I was drinking for a 20-minute dopamine hit. And then 23 hours and 40 minutes of the day was complete hell. So I was doing all of this on a mathematical equation for 20 minutes and it just wasn't worth it anymore. And I was like, well, there you go. That's great.
Megan, you just nailed exactly my story. Like, I was constantly chasing that like you said, that dopamine, initial rush of dopamine that you get from that first initial drink that that you have. And I was chasing that for my whole life, from 25 to 36 to the transplant. I was chasing that comfortable high of relief, of alleviate anxiety. And the more you drink, the less you feel it, and the more you're chasing it, and then all of a sudden you're physically dependent upon it, and then you can't do anything without it.
Yeah.
Megan, so how does your experience as a D1 runner compare to your recovery journey? Are there parallels between the athletic discipline and maintaining your sobriety?
Yeah, these are great questions, by the way.
I was coming up with these on the way in, and I was just like, okay, these are the things I want to know.
These are amazing questions. Very good questions. Very thoughtful. Yeah, so I think, I actually do long distance running, and I think that's like a sense of overcoming, like long distance running is, and those correlate very well. I've done a lot of different things in running. I've been the girl that was good at running, and I've been the girl that was bad at running. I think in college, I tanked. So in high school, I was a phenomenal runner, got all these scholarships, went to college and just lost it all. And I think it was a combination of, I was drinking probably way too much. I'd lost my love for it. I'd lost my passion for it. And running is so mental. So I think now I turned 40. In between then, I kind of bounced back into running. I got really into ultra running, which is a really cool group of like misfit runners where we run further than a marathon. So 50-mile races. I did a 100-mile race, which was literally like living one day, like your whole life in
100 miles.
It was insane. I am so proud of that moment, but like you have to be a little bit insane to do something like
Yeah. You do.
But anyway, now that I'm 40, I just turned 40, like I said, and I am trying to be fast. So I still have a lot of fire in me. I still think I have something to prove from my career that tanked in college. And I think that's fueling me to want to be a fast runner again. So that's what I'm trying to do right now.
Cool. That's really cool. How do you find that? Because I'm sure like it's a lot of running is mental. It must be, because I mean, when you're running 100 miles, you're in your own headspace, and your drive must be off the charts. How can you relate that drive to the drive that you approach your sobriety with?
Another great question. Yeah.
That was off the cuff. That was off the cusp.
This is great. I feel like I'm talking to Barbara Walters.
I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. No, so I mean, that's such a good question. I feel like with running, like it's almost like a sixth sense, if that makes sense. So like it's a form of like transcendence. I don't know. And I guess with alcohol and that, like overcoming that, very similar. I think for me, it's kind of unique because running is my identity. It's been my identity since I was young. And also like I feel as a woman, like for me, I feel so powerful when I run. And I think, that as a woman is so important, like to have that kind of inner strength. And I think like going through those long races, like I did, like the 100-mile race and stuff, and like something I thought I could never do. Like I never thought I would be able to achieve that, was very similar to my alcohol use disorder. I never thought I could get sober. I never thought I could not drink again. I never thought I could live a life in recovery. And we are capable of so much more than our brains think that we are. I feel like we have so much potential and drive in us that we just barely tap into. So I'm learning to tap into that.
Yeah. You mentioned you have children, correct?
Yes, 3.
Was it 3?
Yes.
In a pair of twins?
I do have boy-girl twins.
Okay. With your children, can we back up a little bit? When was your last drink?
April 21st, 2019.
2019. So, okay. So, and you said 6 years, right?
I'll be 6 years this year. Yeah.
6 years. How old were your children alive then, or was it?
So
they were.
The twins were 3 and my oldest was 9. So the twins don't remember, but my 9-year-old was very much affected by my drinking and is very involved in my recovery and a big part of my recovery.
That was going to be my lead up question was, since you've been 6 years sober now, like how do they remember you with, the unfortunate memories of you then? And now, I mean, I'm sure they look at you in a very different way.
Yeah,
right?
The twins don't remember at all. And it was funny the other day, something happened and they were like, wait, you are sober? Like that whole idea, because I'm very open and honest with them about my recovery. They had no idea that I used to drink. They were like shocked to find out that mommy used to have wine. They were like, what? Because they'd never seen me drink wine or anything. And most adults do, right? So my oldest, though, that's a very interesting story. That I had like a spiritual awakening on my last day, on my last drink. I think I surrendered like physically, spiritually, mentally that day, and
Can we go through that last
yeah, yeah,
day of your
absolutely,
drinking? I love those kind of stories.
yeah,
Let's hear
yeah.
it.
So, well, basically, growing up, I think a lot of it was me just trying to be a rebel. I was such a good girl, and got good grades, sat in the front of class. I was an athlete. So I think drinking for me was to kind of tap into that. Like, I don't want to be good anymore. I want to be wild. And, that was very innocent though. Like, just kind of, there was some red flags, but overall I was pretty good. And then, add in 3 children, a marriage that was struggling, and a stressful job. I worked on a night shift, labor and delivery, and my father passed away. I mean, a lot of these things just kind of, the what do they call it? Annie Grace talks about the fly trap, how you sink down deeper until you realize you're at the bottom and then you can't get out. So that was me. I mean, in 6 months before I stopped drinking, I had just like done things that I never thought I would do. So drinking in the morning, drinking for like 10 days straight, you know, drinking around my children. I never drove, but, things I thought I would never actually do. And then I would put rules in place like, well, only drink on Thursday and Friday. And I would always break those rules. And so I had no agency over my life. I had no control. I felt like I had lost everything I had tried to strive for, and I had no confidence. So the last day, I had been on like a 3-day bender, and I didn't drink anywhere around my job. But as a labor and delivery nurse, you work your shifts in a row, and then you have a lot of time off. So I would have like almost double life. Like I was this good nurse and good mom, and then go on a bender. So the last 3 days, I had drank for 3 days straight. And I woke up the next morning and had like extreme suicidal thoughts. I mean, very scary. I'd never had anything like that before. I remember I was like laying in my bed, looking up at my ceiling, hearing my kids and being like, they'd be better off without me. Just end it. Like you have tried everything to stop drinking and you can't. So you're a failure. And then I had another voice that was like, just stand up and see what happens. And I stood up and I was like struck down on my knees. And I think I've talked about this before, but like God slapped me. I was hit by lightning. I had a white light moment. I mean, you name it, whatever you want to call it. And I think that day I surrendered my ego, which is the ultimate act of humility. And I never drank again. I begged for help. I begged God to save me, and I begged him to help me. And then I stood up and I asked for help. I told someone I had a problem. I told my sister, and I called a therapist. And then I'll bring it back to my kids, because my 9-year-old, I told her that day that I would never drink again. And I gave her my word.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many stories I hear of that coming to like a transcendent moment of clarity and asking for forgiveness. A personal story of mine, without getting too much into detail. So when I was in the hospital, I was in the hospital for almost a year and a half.
Wow.
And this is after the liver transplant, and I was having complications with bile duct issues. I was having issues with my kidneys; they weren't waking up, so I was on dialysis and so on and so forth. But there was one night when my stomach exploded and my colon ruptured, and then I lost my stomach was no longer attached to my bowels and my colon rather, and then they had to do an ileostomy surgery. And it was so bad because I was so sick from the liver transplant just happened. I'm on like my deathbed pretty much. And it was really touch and go for the entire night. Like, oh, he might live. Oh, he might die. He might live. He might die. And I did the same exact thing. I said, God, and I grew up Catholic, like super Catholic. My father was very, very Catholic. So that's how we grew up, with mass every Sunday, that kind of thing. And but I still wasn't falling in, like adhering to the dogma of one religion, Catholicism being that one. However, in that night when I was lying in bed and I was looking up at the ceiling and I was in and out of a septic shock because all the fluids and everything was going through my system, and I was confused and I was almost dying. I did have a very long, cold night of self-reflection and asking for God's grace in the last moments of my life. And then I went through each one of the relationships I have in my life, people that are important to me, and I said I'm sorry to them, like telepathically, and then as I started to forgive myself and forgive the other and forgive myself for treating people and just doing the work, like really that really tough work of like going through the situations, like how I treated people when I was under the influence, things like that. And then just saying sorry to them from like a telepathic level, or who knows, like a transcendent, spiritual level, honestly. that's when my health started to improve. My mood started to improve. It stabilized. The surgeries worked. And here I am now. So
That gives me
it does
hope.
amaze me.
That's such a
It
cool
does.
story.
It does amaze me.
Yeah, I mean, I call it spirituality, call it energy. There's something there. There's
There's
definitely
something.
something there. And that's
Totally.
so special.
I felt it.
Yeah. And I think people need to hear that too. And while part of it may have been your own drive, but there was also the higher power involved in that. And I think
for sure, because it was almost like I was forced into that. Like I was so, like I was fighting, and I was so sick that, and I was so confused. But that second where I just gave in to God's grace and or whatever you want to call it, and just became this puddle of vulnerability and remorse, from like the most genuine way that I could express it, that's when things started to change.
Yeah, I think there's so much courage and vulnerability. And I think, our pastor last week was talking about kind of the same thing, like how you have to share like your marks, like that God has impacted you. Like there's certain God moments that you have in your life, maybe 4 or 5, not a whole lot, but like you have to share those with people because that's what gives people hope and inspiration. So it's awesome that you share that part of your story.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So let's get back into your running, because that's also a very fascinating thing too. So ultra running, medical practicing, 3 kids, recovery.
Yep.
How do you balance all of those while maintaining your sobriety?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of energy. A lot of my friends and family would say that's maybe my like unique superpower is I'm like the Energizer Bunny. And, I think when I was drinking, I wasn't using the energy in the right way. I think I also have really big emotions. And I think I had, a big reaction with alcohol. And, the higher you go, the farther you fall, right? So when I had someone like me who was involved with an alcohol use disorder, that wasn't going to end correctly. But now, like, I can kind of fuel that energy to things that matter and things that serve purpose. And so, yeah, I mean, I have like an insane drive in me to do whatever. I don't even know where I'm going, my trajectory is going, but I have like a deep need, of like altruistic need to help people. I have a deep need to feel and like tap into this potential I have with running, because I think that inspires people, especially someone like me who's 40 and I'm beating my D1 times at this age, which is just crazy.
Wow, really?
I don't even know.
That's impressive. That's remarkable.
I don't even know what's happening, but it's amazing. And yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately when your like purpose aligns with your passion, that's your potential. And I've done a bunch of different things in my career. Where I'm at now, I feel really good about what I'm doing in the medical practice that I'm growing. I feel really good about it. So.
That's awesome. That's great. So the balance itself. So is that what you're saying? Like there's a lot of balance in your life now, whereas maybe in the past, not so much.
Correct. I think with anything, like you have to approach it with like structure, discipline, and patience, like anything in your life. And for me, I've like tapped into that. So like I have a very strict like morning routine. Like, for example, I always make my bed. I listen to 10 minutes of worship music. I ride my Peloton for 20 minutes and I meditate for 10. Like every morning, I never miss a day. And I think that structure has really helped keep me balanced. So yeah, I think those things you can really apply to anything. I've also been on like a crazy health journey. I've lost 55 pounds in the last year using those same principles that I had used through my alcohol use disorder to my relationship with food. So that's been really fun too.
Yeah, that first half hour or however long it takes you to do all those things. Me, it'll be much longer. For you, I'm sure it's very quick. But yeah, that I always adhere to this practice of the first half hour and the last half hour of your day should always be intentional, whether that be expressing gratitude, journaling, bettering yourself in any way, whether that be writing, working on a project, something that's not technology focused, right? Like something like put the phone away, have an honest conversation with your spouse or whoever or wherever, a friend, who cares. And then doing that inner work, whether that be physical work, mental work, whatever, that first half hour and the last half hour, it's so key. It's so important. And it's so easy for people to get up in the morning, grab their phone and just get right back into that mood that they were in the day before, instead of having like a restarting process of your day, because every day is different and you should approach each day with enthusiasm and excitement, instead of just be like, oh, it's a Tuesday, I have to get up and go do this. It's like, no, I get to get up, I get to go, you have to like change, you have to reframe your mind into into thinking differently after you get sober.
Yeah, and I think the way that you talk to yourself is so important. Like you have to be in your own corner. You have to be saying positive affirmations to yourself. I also think you bring up a good point. Have you ever read the book Dopamine Nation? Do you know anything about that book? Well, she's a physician, and she talks about like the pain pleasure cycle and how scrolling like on your phone or even alcohol, like you get this little uptick in pleasure from the dopamine hit, but then you fall deep into pain. So she says we should really do it the other way. We should tap into like applied suffering. So things that can elicit some pain. So exercise, doing things we don't want to do, right? Cleaning, all of that. That can actually cause you to go down into pain, but then swing you up into pleasure. So really, we have the whole cycle all wrong.
Wow.
Super interesting book.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. The Social Dilemma, was that one of them?
I haven't heard that one, but Dopamine Nation.
I don't know.
Is
I don't know.
really good.
I was thinking of that when you were talking about it. I know like how we get addicted to our technology and phones, and we're looking for those dopamine spikes.
Yeah.
Instead of chasing like those long lasting good effects, like good dopamine effects, as eating well, exercising, like all these things.
Yeah.
Did you say you practice like mindfulness meditation? Can you what do you do?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about
So
that?
I took a mindfulness course, 6-week course, which was really interesting. We read a lot of books. I loved like Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Are you familiar with him?
Me too.
Love him.
Love him.
We are not our thoughts, but the one who hears them. I say that to myself all day long. And Michael Singer, he's another great one.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I did that course. I had really no, experience with mindfulness meditation. I've done some recovery retreats where we've done lots of meditations, like walking meditations, hour-long meditations. And then I just made it part of my daily practice. I think it took me a while to figure out how to do it. It wasn't easy at first. I have a lot of thoughts going on in my head. And ultimately, I think meditation helps you get to know yourself better, and then also taps into that subconscious mind, because we're always out of our mind, and when you tap into the subconscious, you're like untangling a knot that's probably messed up back there.
Oh, I love that metaphor, untangling a knot, because that's so true. Whatever the reason why that we're really harking on the idea of meditation is because of the practical value of it. I'm not lying. Like, because of meditation, I am just more patient. Like, something that would normally bug me, like someone cutting me off, I start and I think, okay, like 3, 2, 1. Okay, like that person's probably having a bad day. Like, I have no idea what that person's going through. Maybe they lost like a best friend, last night. I don't know. And you always frame it that way. And then I feel like life, it gets a little more smoother when you just, when you're very present, mindful of the moment, of the situation. You're not just reacting. You're putting your energy into the thought before you speak. And then all of a sudden you start feeling better because you're approaching it with a very calm presence. And people will actually, like, you'll start noticing, like, people start gravitating towards the calmness in your life because they're so used to seeing you do different. Have you noticed in your your personal life, like your group friends and things like that, friends that are your friends, let's just say that, do you notice that you had to maybe leave some behind and move on, or are you still pretty much attached to the people that you were associating with?
Yeah,
prior?
that was a tough one. Absolutely, I had to leave some friendships behind. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those friendships, the foundation was on alcohol, right? And that's hard. I think I hung on to them a little longer than I should have because of the comfortability of it all. But no, I mean, once you start analyzing those things and realizing they're just dragging you down. But also, like, you have to be very careful with how you approach that, because I don't want to ever come from a place of self-righteousness, because we're just living completely different lives now. It's not that I'm better than you or anything like that.
No, yeah, everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah, we just have, different interests. And there'll be times that I'll go out with my friends and they're all drinking, and I don't mind. Like, I can have a good time without it. Like, I have my Shirley Temple, I'll dance, I'll have fun. But after a certain hour, like, then it's not fun for me once, they're repeating words or getting to a certain level. And all I'll do is just say, I'm going to go home. Love you guys. Be careful. Like, I'll just tap out, and that's fine. And that we have that type of relationship.
Yeah, that's such a healthy way to do it. I do it the exact same way. Like, I get there, I'm enjoying it. I'm getting to know, getting the conversations like that I want to get out of everyone. And then, yeah, same thing. You start to hit like my threshold point is probably like 10.
Yes, same. Me too. That's mine too. That's so funny.
Because that's when usually the drinking gets ramped up, right? Which, I don't want to be around that part, because God knows, like, that's still in me. So I don't want to even be associated with the the allure of it. So
Right.
that's one reason. But the other reason is just I feel like the conversations, they start to lack depth after a certain level, and that's just from personal. I'm not saying that's everyone that's drinking. That's definitely not the case. But in some personal experiences, that's what I've noticed. And then it's not serving me anymore in that sense, right? And that was kind of like one of the biggest things I learned in recovery, is that it just wasn't serving me for so many years, and I was still using it as like a coping strategy to break through the weeds of social interactions and
Mhm.
and encompass and putting my own insecurities within the alcohol itself.
Mhm.
Um, when you got sober, what was the hardest part for you?
That's a loaded question. I think, in the beginning, I had the pink cloud for sure. I was
Mhm.
just so happy that I had made it, 7 days, and then 3 weeks and then a month. The hardest part, I think, was probably wanting to escape whatever emotion I was wanting to escape from and not being able to escape.
Mhm.
I don't want to feel like what I'm feeling right now, and my previous coping mechanisms, I can't do those anymore. So how do I develop, healthy coping strategies? How do I deal with my own emotions without resorting back to negative and bad behaviors? So I think I had a lot of emotional intelligence growth that first year. Still learning. I'm still on that journey.
Same.
Still on
Yeah,
that
same.
journey. But it's been amazing. I mean, this past year has been wild. I have gone through a divorce, which has been very interesting to tackle that sober. And I don't have cravings to drink again. I have, since the day God slapped me in my face, I have never had a craving, but I definitely have struggled with my emotions. And so
Yeah.
now I do healthier things. Obviously, I reach out to people when I'm struggling. Running has really saved my life, getting back into that. Meditation, I think I love how you described your meditation, but like ultimately it's living in the present moment, because we have like circumstantial evidence that, the future and the past exist, but the only thing we actually know exist is the present moment. And that's really what
Mhm.
life is about. So, going back to that. And then a lot of like the work that I've read has really helped, the thing about the thoughts. There was one analogy I heard about thoughts that I loved. It was like, you're driving the bus, like you're driving the school bus, and the little kids in the back with the sticky hands, like those are your bad thoughts. And you don't let them hold the wheel, right? You would never let the kids on the bus drive the bus. And I think about that sometimes with my like bad or negative thoughts, like you're in control. Just let those thoughts, let those whatever ride through your brain and then continue driving, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that metaphor hits very close to home because I'm a middle school teacher and everything is sticky and and smelly. And I would associate that metaphor with definitely the what alcohol is, and it's sticky and it's messy and it ruins a lot of things. But yeah, that's a good one. I'll have to remember that one. Now, what now that you're clear minded, you're running, like what else are you passionate about? What else do you want to pursue at this 6 point stage in your sobriety? Not that you haven't accomplished enough, but I'm just curious, like, where do you want to go next? What are your hopes? What are your
Yeah,
dreams?
I love that. I have a deep need to like fill my service cup. So while I have
Mm-hmm.
this practice and I love it and I can't wait to grow this and see where it goes, I also would love to do what you're doing. I would love to start my own podcast and my own recovery, not in the terms of monetizing or lucrative, but to fill that service cup.
Oh, there's no money in this. I haven't made one single dollar. I've probably sunk. I don't want to say it out loud, but yeah, I am completely doing all of this for like just the 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 love that you get back
Hmm.
from helping someone. I mean, that you cannot put a monetization, you cannot put a money sign on something like that. When
Yeah.
someone tells you that you've helped them genuinely,
Hmm.
stay off drinking that night or whatever, that just some compelling thing,
Hmm.
some compelling stuff that just really hits to the core of your soul.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Yeah. No,
So maybe a
we'll
podcast.
see. I'm in talks with some people about it. I mean, I definitely, however I expand in my career, I always will be a recovery advocate, and I will always be a mental health advocate, like through and through. I'm proud of, I think ultimately, like when we talk about grace, like grace means that like all the stuff, the mistakes that we made served a purpose rather than serving shame. And I think that is what, recovery work is.
Yeah. Can we actually back up a little bit? I know we've talked about already about all the great stuff, but like, what was a day in the life of you at your worst?
Yeah, it's hard to go back there in my
I know.
mind.
I hate having to do. I should usually that's why usually I work up and then we start talking about the good stuff.
Yeah.
But I really I feel like we didn't touch on it with you, and that we would be doing a disservice to
Yeah.
people if we
No,
didn't.
absolutely. I mean, I think when I was younger, like I said, I was just a party, like a good girl during the day and wanted to like cut loose at night. But then, add in all of life that happened. And I didn't have big T trauma. I had a lot of little T trauma that just add up. And I had just an immature, an insecurity that it was kind of the perfect storm. But, the last 6 months is where it really turned. We had gone to Italy and Spain, and I had learned the dangerous trick of, well, you're just going through city to city. Like you have to keep drinking because I was having really bad hangovers. So I couldn't function if I had a hangover. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to keep drinking. And then I brought that dangerous habit back home to America of drinking in the morning. So, I mean, I think, my situation was different because I was still working and I was sober when I was working. But if I had, a few days off, it was, drink all night in the morning, start drinking again because I was so hungover and I had to take care of my kids and start doing all of the normal household chores. And then just feeling awful. Like I remember I would just look at myself in the mirror and be like, what have you let your life become? Like you used to be so strong. You're an ultra runner, you're a college athlete, you're top of your class, and look at you. Like you are a
Mm-hmm.
disgrace. And that's the things I would say to myself, but I still
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't change my behavior. And it's so interesting. I'm sure you've heard this before, but like I would wake up and be like, okay, I'm not going to drink, pour all my wine down the sink. And then at 4 o'clock, I would go to the grocery store and buy it again. Like that's
Yes.
literally the definition of insanity.
Yeah, I was doing the same. I was so self-loathing. About the mirror thing, I've said this many times on the show, but I didn't walk past a mirror unless I was like forced to or whatever, but I really avoided mirrors at all costs because I was so ashamed of who I was. I was raised the right way. I was a very athletic guy. I did everything. I got pretty good grades. Like, I was a teacher. Like, I had all these things that on paper you'd be like, oh, this guy will be fine. But I was secretly just
Mhm.
suffering so badly and so physically addicted. Did you get to any of that? Did you get to the physical dependency part at
So,
all?
so that's a good question. I was not like I didn't have to go to detox or have a benzo taper or anything like that, but I was starting to have physical symptoms from my drinking that last 6 months. That was terrifying because I'm in the medical world. At that time, I was just a nurse, but I knew what was happening. So I would get tremors. I started to get dysphagia, where you get the esophageal stricture, you can't swallow food. I had the like alcoholic neuropathy where my hands were going numb, panic attacks. My blood pressure
Yeah.
was high. I mean, just it was awful. It's so crazy that I had let my life get like that. And, I think it's also a testament that you can absolutely turn your life around. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like look at you. You know what I mean? Like you can
If you would have seen me 3 years ago, like if you would have seen me, you would not recognize who I am. I was huge. I was 250 pounds, all ascites, all because of the liver enzymes were just not filtering anything. The kidneys were not filtering the blood. Like everything was just building up, building up. The toxins were building up, building up. I had to take lactulose was the medication that they give you. It's disgusting. It helps you like clear the waste and things like that. And then the immunosuppressants that I'm on now, it gives you a lot of brain fog and neuropathy,
Mhm.
tons of that because of the immunosuppressant medications and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare being an active addiction. It just is.
It's interesting how we can get, in the comfortability of our own suffering. I don't know if you ever listened to Trisha Lewis. She had a podcast called Recovery Happy Hour years ago. She doesn't have it anymore, but I was listening to one of her episodes years ago, and she talked about this study where you have people come in, they have six radio stations, and the first five radio songs were songs that the people didn't know. But the sixth song was a song that they absolutely hated, but they were familiar with it. 100% of the people chose the song that they hated just because they were familiar with it. And that you can kind of show with like alcoholism, alcohol use disorder. Like even though you're suffering, it's just you're comfortable in your own suffering because you're so afraid to step out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
of suffering.
Yeah. And that just reminded me of something too. It's like when there've been studies that have been done that if you were to like basically tally someone's day or just kind of like, you know, follow someone along and like make notes of like their day and then read it back to them at the end of the day, they'll say like, oh, I got cut off in traffic. Oh, like this, and my boss, didn't promote me or whatever I thought they were going to. Like, but then like the person, like if they were to go back and like read their day back to the person that they just observed, then they would say like, well, look at this. This person held the door for you. This person offered you a free coffee. You're not paying attention to any of those things. And I don't know why as humans, we do tend to focus on that negative thing. And then alcohol, for me, in my alcoholism, I was so ashamed and so in self-denial about the whole situation that it didn't feel worthy to be alive anymore. And that's like how bad it got towards the end. I was just like, I give up. Like, I just don't want to be anyone's burden anymore, even to myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, isn't that funny how we do focus on those negative things and how that's so similar when it comes to addiction too? We just focus on the negative instead of looking for like, well, you didn't drink as much today. That's a positive, like things like that. That's how you get to like approach sobriety at the beginning. I feel like actually throughout the entire process of sobriety, I feel like you should approach it that way.
I think it's super interesting. There's a whole study, psychological study on learned helplessness. Are you familiar with that term?
I am familiar with the term, not as much, I'm sure, that you're going to go into right now, though.
But yeah, so it's like basically a study of dogs back in the 1960s. And I won't go into all the details of the study, but they shocked, different groups of the dogs. And then these dogs that were shocked, so they had been exposed to like multiple negative situations. Even though they could escape the room that they were in, they didn't escape. They had been conditioned in their own inability to help their lives. So I think a lot of that can correlate with alcohol use and alcoholic behavior, because you get in this cycle of like, well, I've tried every single thing to get sober and nothing works. So I'm completely helpless over my life. And you see that a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you have, in order to get people out of that, you have to give them emotional support and love and hope. And I think what you're doing and like other podcasts like that, that is really what gives people hope. These stories, hearing these stories of, act 2, act 1,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really nice that you just said that. I want to be mindful of the time. So as someone who's combined healthcare, mental health advocacy, and recovery into their life, what is your vision for changing how we approach addiction treatment? Like, where do you want to see it go? Like, how would you want to frame it?
Yeah, I think, what we're doing now in the recovery world in terms of like talking about it a lot more rather than just in a church basement with bad coffee and no hate to AA.
Bad coffee and people who are resentful instead of being actually like glad to be, sober.
Right. Yeah. And no hate to them. They're, obviously doing great things. They've been around a long time.
No, yeah. I always feel like I always get lit up by that. I so appreciate what the 12-step program AA, it has helped thousands, millions even maybe. And so I am not, shoo-shooing it away. Absolutely not. But yes, what are you going to say?
Well, I was saying just like all of these new, team players in recovery. I like to look at recovery like we're all like different players on the same team. So like all of the different groups and, there's Smart Recovery, there's Celebrate Recovery, there's all of these online groups. So many options, which we did not have 5-10 years ago. And that's amazing. I also think we need to take down big alcohol a little bit. I feel a little.
Let's go. Let's take him down. Let's get on the.
Like, what time do we ride?
Pick it.
5 a.m. I'll be there with you. I mean, this whole glamorizing alcohol we got to be honest. I love like a few weeks ago that it came out that, breast cancer is caused by alcohol. Like, I've known this for years. I've spoken openly about this. And it's so interesting as a medical provider, because you'll go to these like breast cancer awareness galas and parties and they're serving wine. And I'm like looking at this, like, this is causing the cancer. Like, who are we fooling here? I feel really passionately about changing that on, a global level. And I think we're starting to get some traction there about alcohol and like the damaging effects. And sometimes I wonder if like, how cigarettes were in the 90s, we didn't really know the harmful effects and now we do. I wonder if alcohol will eventually come to that level.
Yeah, I wonder that too. I know there have been studies done that with like Gen Zs, like the alcohol sales are on the decline and they're using it at far less. I think marijuana might have this might be a reason behind that, but I don't know. I haven't seen all the data, but that is encouraging, at least, to know that the younger generation is kind of maybe listening to the older, in the sense that it's probably not a good idea to have 7 beers, get in the car and drive, or make a fool out of yourself because you don't know what you said, or have to apologize from whatever the night before. Like, all those things can be eliminated the second that you choose not to drink, right? And then there's so many other ways that you can still get the same out of life. If you can actually get more out of life when you do put the bottle down, because then you can start thinking with the clarity of a sober mind and start pursuing your interest in the most genuine way possible, instead of having that nasty hangover or just have that brain fog from like a week of drinking or a very long
Yeah.
weekend of drinking, whatever.
I mean, you bring up such a good point, like not relying on an external substance to make you happy, but instead relying on yourself. There's infinite freedom in that, and there's infinite power in that, and you're going to be better and stronger for it. So,
Yes. Well said. I think that's how we're going to end it. I like that. That's a very nice uplifting end note there. So thank you, Megan.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Megan, where can people find you before we jump off?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Georgia, I have a practice called Northside Family Medicine and Geriatrics. We'd love to take care of you. We see ages 16 to 104. And yeah, on Instagram, I'm just starting doing my social media thing. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but we are in a digital age, so I will encompass that. But my handle is Megan Eileen 3. But yeah, I am so excited to be a part of this movement. This has been so fun talking with you. It's really an honor to hear your story and to be a part of your movement. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Megan, for coming on, and everyone for watching. And thank you so much for being here. I really don't say it enough. Thank you, everyone out there, for watching, liking, subscribing, whatever you're doing. Keep it up, because every day that you do that, I get reminded of why I started this in the first place, and that's very powerful. So thank you very much, everybody out there, and be on the lookout for many, many more episodes coming soon. Thank you, Megan.
Of course. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.